Now that we have refactored our code from this large language model code that you just saw over here, but now this is the pain that we also have to go through. I mean, this is not really a pain, but you have to, first of all, have a good understanding of what these codes are. Sometimes you may have a situation that you may need to have an explanation of what these code does. So one of the example is this one. As you can see, you may be familiar with Java, for instance, and you know how to write the code like this probably. But let's say you have a question where you don't even know what this code does. For instance, the perform drop down selection operation is a method which writes a which has got a lot of code there, but you don't really understand what this code does. So if you need an explanation of this code, what will you do? And what if you wanted to have a documentation of all these code so that you can just keep on adding them all here? So in order for you to do that, you can sometimes just go to these chat GPT over here, and then you can just say, explain me the code, and then you can copy paste the code snippet over here, and immediately you will notice that this large language model will start to break down every single line of code. It says that this is a public, which is an accessible from other classes. So it's basically an access modifier. And there is a static, which means it is going to be called without creating an instance of the class. And there is a void, which is a return type. And there is this perform drop down selection by text, which is going to be a method names, which is especially an action which it performs on the drop down box. And it says there is a parameter called as web element locator, which is the first parameter of this method, and this reference to the HTML element representing the dropdown. You'll notice that it drilled down so deep to get you all the insights that you're looking for. Not only that, it also gives you an example of how this method can be used while it is going to be selecting the value or an option from this particular text over here. This is really cool. This way you can understand how a specific code actually works. And not only that, let's say tomorrow, if you wanted to have a data-driven testing with TestNG that you need to perform on this particular test, for instance, if you have got a Selenium test over here and you want to perform a data-driven testing over there, how will you actually do that? So you see that at the moment, I have explained in my other course about data-driven testing using the data provider, something like this. And I have added those code over here. But what if this particular code doesn't make sense, or what if you wanted to do it immediately without you spending so much of time? So how do you actually do that? Well, in those instances, you can just copy this code and then just go to the chat GPT over here, and then you can ask it whether you can write the data driven testing code from here. So I'm going to go and say, ask here, like, write data driven testing with TestNG for this code over here, and make sure the data comes data is populated for create new employee method for all the parameters which are currently hard coded. So you will notice that I'm even giving some typos while I type it, but this large language model can understand that I am not good at writing it, and it also can understand what I'm trying to ask. So it just rephrases what I'm trying to do over here, and it starts to modify my method. Look at that. It's beautiful. It just passes every single thing in the test b create employee. It passes all the different parameters over here, and then it is just passing those value. But guess what? It is bringing the value from an employee data provider method over here, pretty much like what I have written in my code over here. As you can see, it is just bringing up those data, and then it passing pretty much like how I have done over here. Like this value, it's passing every single value there, and then it just works. This is one of the most important thing. whatever that you have written over here, you can sometimes even cross reference with this large language model to make sure that the code that you have written is actually matching what is being expected. And it also explains you what is being written over here, and it is so good. So there is a breakdown of all this information. This is already amazing. It is doing quite a lot of things for us. And now if you wanted to ask, like, can you pass in custom type instead of you passing every single thing over here, like you just use that employee method that you have just created, this one, right? Because this employee model that we have got has got this name, salary, duration worked, grade, and email, and that's what I'm passing in as the data for this method, right? The name, salary, email, duration worked, and the grade, something like that. So if I want to ask the GPT to write those for me, it does that for you as well. But guess what? You know what the idea is. We can do every single thing. We can also get the explanation of our code, and we can start refactoring our code for our automation testing. Even sometimes we can match what we're looking for is exactly matching with the GPT. That's how we can enhance our code, refactoring the code, and get the explanation of the code in much easier fashion.